You could also mention that I've been a reader in Leonard's apartment.
2 years ago on St. Patrick's Day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I decided I needed a subject for a reading and started looking in the Sheriff's Call section of the West Marin paper, The Point Reyes Light. And these little entries have caught my imagination. I have a whole book of them, and I can't seem to stop. So the first thing I'm going to read is the entry, and I'm going to go right into the story. From The Point Reyes Light, January 23rd, 2014, Forest Knolls. At 2:03 p.m., someone heard a man screaming, "Doris," for an hour in a vacant lot. This is called A Date with Brando. Well, he certainly wasn't calling my name, Doris said, folding foil in Mrs. Reinhardt's thin bluish hair. Mrs. R. wanted more color, but Doris disagreed. As usual, in discussions between them, Doris usually lost. Anyway, she said, "I don't live in Forest Knolls." "Well, you could have been driving through," Mildred snorted. She hadn't been very happy lately. Nothing much was happening in West Marin, and she was not amused. They were alone in the beauty salon, except for half-dead Beatrice, who was sitting in the corner, muttering to herself and examining her recent manicure. "So, what do you think? What's he like, Doris?" Mildred asked excitedly. "And who might that be, Mrs. R.? Doris has only mentioned to Beatrice that she had been on one lousy date with Max from Shada's next door, and now everyone knew. She shouldn't have even tried to have a life. She went in the back room to mix up color. Coming back into the salon, she looked at her mixture. She kneaded it a little, hoping her little indiscretion with color would disappear like the gossip about her date. "Oh, you know him," Mrs. R. went on, staying very still. She loved it when Doris mussed with her hair, and if she could persuade Fred to loosen his tightwad ways, she'd go in twice a week. "Ah," she moaned. A second later, she sat up worried. "Is he at all like Joshua? I know you girls like your ex-husbands, Doris. But do you think you are settling for less?" "I don't like Joshua. He's gone, man," Doris answered. "Oh, brother, one lousy date, one lousy marriage, and everyone knew her business." Doris swore under her breath. She was going to have to play it even tighter, but give up dating? Her one date in 2 years? "How do you like the color, Mrs. R.?" she asked gingerly. Jesus, her hair was almost cerulean blue, the color of the sky. Could she rinse it out now? "Are you sure that guy in Forest Knolls wasn't calling your name like Stella in a streetcar named Desire?" "Stella! Isn't that right? Maybe your boyfriend looks like Marlon Brando." Mildred took a breath. And in West Marin, too, she wondered if Henry would let her borrow his caddy. Fred didn't like her to drive, but Henry was amenable to anything. She pulled out her cell phone. "Ma'am, quit wiggling, please. I have sharp scissors in my hand." In her lap, Mildred punched in 5. Henry, if he was home, if he was awake, if he was willing. Too many ifs with Henry these days. "I went out with Brando once. What a dream," tiny Beatrice piped up. She jumped out of her seat. "He came to West Marin, Mildred?" "Where? Oh, I've got to see him." She fussed with the light, flipping through the pages. "Do you think Art Rogers took a photo of Brando?" "Rogers takes photos of babies and farmers, Mrs. Elliott," Doris said. "Anyway, Brando is dead, isn't he? Didn't he die quite a few years back?" "How can you be so cruel, Doris?" Beatrice fell into one of the chairs. "I loved him, and he was here in Forest Knolls. Mrs. Willis told me." She got up and peered out in the street. Nothing much happening this Monday morning. She'd straighten that out in a hurry. "Beatrice, sit down. You're bothering my concentration," Mildred said. "How's it going, Doris? You finished yet?" "Just one final rinse, Mrs. R," Doris replied. "Would you mind stepping over here?" She gestured to a wash basin. Beatrice's one gnarly hand on the window frame was focused on something out on the street. It was a limo parked in front of Toby's. "It's him." "Who?" Mildred turned suddenly, knocking the spray nozzle out of Doris's hands. Water flew onto the mirror, the counter, and the floor. "Mrs. R., Mrs. Darcy, please sit down and be quiet. Only 10 in the morning. Ladies, please," Doris said. "Whoever it is, he's handsome as hell," Mildred said. Both ladies were at the window peering out. Mildred with a head full of foil and blue tint on the cotton near her ears, and Beatrice's head decorated with curlers. "He can't see us like this," they both said in unison, and hurried to hide in the back of the shop. Doris turned to look. Whoever it was, he was coming this way. Toward the salon, towards Dan's next door. The ladies were right. He did look a little like Brando. She smoothed back her hair, threw off her apron, came to the front door, and made it jingle. The man stopped mid-stride in the middle of the street. "Doris," he called. "Doris." Brando or not, Doris didn't know him, but it didn't matter. What a gorgeous man. "Go talk to him. Bring him inside. Give him a do," Beatrice cried from the back of the shop. "Ladies, please, some decorum," Doris answered. But still, he was calling her name. She stepped out onto the sidewalk. "Doris!" the man cried again. "My turn. It's my turn, finally," Doris thought. "A real date. My prayers have been answered." She moved further out onto the street. Police cars swarmed in front of the shop, lights, sirens blaring. Linda Kettleman, a seasoned deputy now, had received the call. She saw Doris in the middle of the road, the man stepping forward, calling her name. "Doris, stop," she cried. Doris looked puzzled, shifted her gaze from the man to the cop and back to the man again. "Go get him, Doris!" The ladies at the salon were outside now, cheering her on. "You go, girl!" Honestly, Linda muttered under her breath, "Bernard, quick!" And Bernard, another cop, walked around the man who looked like Brando. "Mr. Henderson, sir." The man stopped, blinked, saw the 2 uniforms surrounding him. "Doris?" he asked in a small voice. "If you wish," Linda said, and escorted him to a waiting police car. She came back to find Doris, her own self, standing in the middle of the street, gasping for breath. "Guess it wasn't really Brando," Mildred whispered to Beatrice. "I really did go out with Brando once," Beatrice said. "Even if you don't believe me, I have a picture to prove it. Want to see?" And Doris, coming to, followed them back into the salon. It was going to be a long week. Thank you.